Good evening, everyone. Hope you're well. Hope you're staying safe, and hope you're taking care of you and yours in these troublesome times. My name is Neil Nagwekar. I am project lead for the Homemaker series at tellmeyourstory.biz. That's tellmeyourstory.biz, and welcome to the 12th session of the Homemaking Talk series. The 12th session, we have come quite a way, and we are close to the conclusion now, close to the finish line. We began with the individual, we moved on to families and communities, and now it is time to discuss the country as a whole, India. In fact, in the last session, we began this discussion with a detailed talk with Captain D.K. Sharma, a former retired naval officer. Today, we are going to talk about the making of the motherland, exploring multi-faith pilgrim journeys across Indian traditions. Of course, since this is a Facebook Live session, questions are more than welcome. Just put them on the comments and we will get to them if we have time. Without further ado, let me introduce my guest, Dr. Piyush Roy. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Neil, and pleasure
Hope
to
you're
be on this platform.
Pleasure is all ours, Doctor. Dr. Piyush Roy is an Indian National Film Award winning critic slash columnist. He's an international author, curator, filmmaker, and professor in film, journalism, and the study of aesthetics. He brings over 2 decades of work experience in media, publishing, education, and filmmaking. Presently, he is the Dean of RV University Bangalore. He is also working on a documentary trilogy exploring multi-faith pilgrim journeys across spiritual traditions, along with writing a film history and review column for The Hindu. Dr. Piyush, there's so much to get into when it comes to your contributions to cinema or to India in general. But of course, we'll try to keep it more confined to the documentary trilogy that you're working on right now. Could you give us a brief overview of the idea behind this documentary trilogy?
Thank you, Neil. You've been like really kind and said so many nice things. Uh, Before I come to the spiritual trilogy, because you introduced me as a writer and a journalist, academic, and a filmmaker, and I'll tell you something that connects me to all these three seemingly different callings is my interest in people, a genuine interest. You cannot be a good journalist, you cannot be a good storyteller if you're not interested in people, knowing them and knowing them from a perspective of a learner. And so this trilogy is also an outcome of that, because oftentimes pilgrimages are so much perceived to be about the destination. You know, we go to a particular place, click pictures, do our pujas and other whichever religious tradition you come from, and that somehow becomes the focus. But the way pilgrimages were meant, irrespective of whether it was in east or the west, one fundamental question: why they were often in a place which was not far from the habitation? Why would the whole idea was people started walking, getting together, knowing each other. So, be it the Amarnath Yatra or the Camino de Santiago. And the trigger for the first film was walking the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And this was in a multi faith group, but working on one of the oldest pilgrimage paths in the Christian tradition. And there are many pathways to Camino from Portugal, from France, from Spain. People just start and walk, and there are shells guiding the path. So first I walked the path, and second time when this opportunity came, I thought, why not record the journey, because the journey itself was so very enriching. And this whole idea that this was being organized by Heartbeat Foundation, and who also commissioned the film project along with the Edinburgh University chaplaincy, was just walk. And we had people from various faith groups, various nationalities, various age groups, and we traveled through very hot terrain, traveled through rocky landscapes, miles of highways, dense eucalyptus forests by the Atlantic Ocean, and we would sit, walk, and then take a break. Somebody from a faith tradition would read their something from their scriptures, something about how they internalize that. There were young people, there were very senior people. The life gives certain other interpretations to so-called thoughts, quotes, and all. And so it was not in India, but there were Indians on the journey, of course. And
Could you tell us more about this hotspot of people that came together?
Yes, yeah, it's quite like the Canterbury Tales, and so like where you have a motley group of people with no connections. It's like going literally on an adventure trip, but here the adventure destination was something spiritual. And seriously, I would say spiritualism is something you discover on the way. For some, that moment dawns maybe day one. Sometimes when they're aloof, sometimes they were battling blisters and all that, and then it's a very unspoken thing. But what at the core of it was that you came back feeling enriched about the human experience, enriched about the faith traditions, and basically understanding that we all are same. Our quests are the same, irrespective of our color, backdrop, race, region, age, gender. Basically it is just it's all about connecting with the soul, and sometimes in our busy lives we don't get that moment, and that kind of triggered me to okay, then this film shaped up, and it shaped up pretty well. It's just a 30-minute film, and then I thought, why not explore another faith tradition, which is the present film that is under product and actually under post production, should be getting ready by the end of the year, which is looking at the pilgrimage that happens during the kind of people flock to Puri, Jagannath Puri, one of the four holy shrines in the Vaishnav Hindu tradition of Lord Jagannath, and pull the chariot. And there are many things that happen there which doesn't happen in a orthodox temple context, where the deities actually come out. The actual deities leave the temple, they go out for a couple of days on a chariot. People are dragging, people from all faith traditions again come, because sadly the temple today prohibits, only allows Orthodox Hindus inside. It was not the same always, but look at the irony of it. Like one of the maximum bhajans that are sung in Orissa today on Lord Jagannath, actually by a Muslim saint poet called Salabe, who history says that at some point was a general in a very extended way in Aurangzeb's army. So all these things are there. How do you explain that? How do you explain the fact that people from the Sagun and Nirgun traditions, the tradition of faith that believes God to be a concept and an idea, but abstract, and also one who associate him with an image and a deity, they both come and experience faith. And faith in many ways, like fun, people are crying, people are talking to the God direct, because this couple of these days when he's out and on the chariot, there is no priest between the devotee and the Lord. So people directly, there is a huge catharsis happens there. Something which happened on the Camino de Santiago. There came a point where all the pilgrims were kind of facing the Atlantic Ocean, and they were asked to pick up a rock, put all their bitterness of life in that rock, throw it into the ocean, and give a loud yawp.
How does
And
that
like,
work? I mean, forgive my materialism. I'm just curious.
yeah, it's when we like talk about it, it might sound like this is so crazy. But when you through the process, when you see the first thing that these journeys allow you, when you walk through a dense forest and there is nobody for miles, you are either walking in pairs, or sometimes you leave the pair and just walk and contemplate, notice things. We just often don't see what is around. We might walk the same pathways many times and still not see. And I think this allows us, and also being away from phone and no network sometimes also helps. So, yeah,
Let's
so,
talk
so
in little greater detail about the first movie in particular. I think that was the one that was to Commune de Santiago. Uh,
yeah.
where did the pilgrimage begin from, and how many people were there with you?
Yeah, so this was like an open call. Anybody could take
Okay.
part on it, and it was but people had to write in why they want to walk this path,
Oh,
and it was
okay.
yeah. So it was not a competition, just because they wanted to know the organizers that why people want to come in, and like so there were about 6 7 students from various streams from UK, and then there were 6, 7 people from US. Some of them were pastors. Some of them were like there was one hippie socialist, and then there were scientists. There were students with studying PhD student doing linguistics. Some an undergraduate student from one girl was from Malaysia, one from Sudan. So then, and there was one girl representing the Hindu Society of the Edinburgh University, and again a researcher of cancer. Uh, so you had these very different background people who would ideally, normal circumstances, never meet each other. And I
Yeah.
think that that's the beauty of it. That's the because it then we normally kind of tend to seek friendships or equations or conversations within our own age group. It's a very natural tendency. Like we always keep looking at a peer and go and talk. But here you are forced because you don't have any other option. I mean, when you 12 people are walking in the middle of a forest for miles with nobody around, you talk to each other and you try to understand that the person who is slightly older cannot keep up pace, and you empathetically reduce your own pace. This is something transforming, and this happens through the experience of it. And see, what is pilgrimage after all? What I mean, it basically we that human empathy. And if then there is a, and I think this journey, what it does is takes you from the zone of sympathy to empathy, because it is only about a shared pain or a shared pleasure, or suddenly seeing in the valley, the sun coming up, the spectacular sights, you all sharing it together. That kind of makes the difference, and through that, you experience godliness also at some level. You just be thankful of what is there.
Some very astute observations there on the walking pace and how sympathy turns to empathy. Could you tell me around how many kilometers was this entire walk for the first film at least? And
It
how
was
many
100
days?
miles. 100 miles
Oh,
across 7 days.
oh God.
So you know how we started? We actually
Uh,
started from the airport. We came out of the Santiago no, we came out at the airport, and from there we travel light. It is all, everybody carries hand luggage because whatever you are carrying is the weight you are carrying through the entire walk. So people bring 2, 3 pairs of clothes every morning. They dry them, put it on the backpack. It dries through the way, and you change and wear it. So that kind of a thing, and you literally start walking out of the airport, and then you start. I mean, like about 20 miles, and the day one is of course through the. You come out of the city, you go through the highways and all, and places are planned through the path where you go and stay in these little, sometimes it could be a inn, sometimes it could be a decent hotel, sometimes it could be just a hostel, empty hostel where you run bunk beds and that kind of a thing. And so that's how it is. And I remember the like a day one, you walk about say 15 miles. The longest that you do on one day is somewhere in the middle, about 30 miles, and then again the pace is reduced because you see nobody is a conventional walker that way. None of these people who came on this trip, they're not like regular walkers. And so when the pain starts setting in, it is planned in a way that you do one day like just 10 odd miles, that kind of a thing. And the way it happens is that every inn that you stay, you carry a journal with you, which is along with writing and all, you get stamped in the hotel that you stay. So when point 1 to point 10 or 9 or 7, whatever you do, through these stamps, they decide, okay, now you walked 100 miles. And you need to minimum walk 100 miles to get the Camino certificate. That's the whole thing. Of course, some people, we did a 7-week walk, but we met people on the way who were walking for 4 weeks. So people do 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, but minimum it's about uh, as I said, you can just start from any particular point that you fancy and then just do the journey. So that's how it works.
could you tell us about the day, the seventh day, when you finally reached the Commune de Santiago? What did you do and how was it like?
Sorry? Uh,
The the last day when you eventually reach the point, your destination. What did you all do and how was it like?
What was unique about this journey was that we walked one of these old pathways, and in between, we also went to Santillana de Mar, which is one of the oldest and most beautiful villages in North Spain. But the organizers had made a conscious decision that we will not actually go to the church. Of course, we went to other churches on the way, but we actually ended it in this very old mountain cave in Ribasadela, which
Oh,
had
wow.
human artworks dating back to some thousand of years old. And it's like the idea was, now go and see, like somebody out there has painted this thing, another human being, perhaps like some 5,000 years ago, and you just go and admire that. And that again is a very surreal experience, because the whole thing is, you start thinking about creation, and creator is everywhere. I mean, you don't only have to be in a temple or a religious place to find God. He's everywhere, and that's what as you that was actually a wow moment for all of us. Like, we from 21st century, these people are walking the paths which have been walked for years and years, and then we go into this human cave. It's a I mean, it's a very ancient cave, but has with lot of old artworks and all that, like basically animal paintings and those kind of things. I think it dates back to the huntsman era kind of a thing. So the exact nitty gritty, it's been a couple of years now, so I don't remember, but I definitely intend to do the walk again sometime, maybe once all these COVID and everything is gone. Yeah.
Of course, you also did a second walk, which is covered in the second film and is more, let's say, geographically pertinent to India. Could you tell us something about this walk, how it began, how many people were there, etc., etc.?
Uh, no, the second one was like not so much of a walk, but it was a film that got me going to various places associated with the legends and the myths around the Jagannath Temple story. So, like, the whole thing is that there is a whole contestation. I mean, is he a Aryan deity? He's not. I mean, because he was a tribal. The tribals first worshipped this form of the Lord, and that's why if you look at the image, also it's very non-conventional. There are no complete hands, there are no legs, and all. It is more like a symbol and that kind of a thing. So the tribals used to worship. So we went to that space, which is in a very picturesque area, about 60 to 70 kilometers from Bhubaneswar. And in the back of beyond, where the river is so wide that from one end of the Mahanadi, the other end you can't see. It is that wide. And it's a dense forest. And so we went to that place associated with the legends. Then we went to the village of Salbeg, the saint poet, and then other places. So this was, again, I was shooting this over 4 years, because the Yatra is a massive human gathering. About 10 lakh plus people gather at normal time. So even as a documentary maker, you have to go and figure out where am I going to be. I mean, I don't get want to be run over by the people coming in the throes, and when the chariots stop and then they move. And that's the English word Jagannath has come from the Jagannath Rath Yatra. The something massive moving at your, that word actually has been coined from this experience.
I
So
did
we
not know
did
that.
that, and there it was like I've been had a whole motley crew of cameramen, different cameramen joining me every year. So about 10 to 14 of them. Sometimes we just got kids to take camera and just go play around, capture whatever they wanted. And sometimes we would hire a professional person to do that. And one year we recorded the chariots leaving the temple. Next year the chariots coming into the temple. So this has been shot, and then a major part of it is also shot in UK. This is about because Rath Yatra is something that the ISKCON does as an annual activity, not necessarily on the date of the date of the event, but on a convenient Sunday through Hyde Park. And then in Edinburgh, we had shot about with the ISKCON, and it's again an amazing experience. They kind of close the main street where the chariots go from Hyde Park to Trafalgar Square, and then all like people coming out of their work come and sing and there it is more about song and dance and that kind of a thing. It's like you take the pub experience onto the road kind of a thing. So that daytime and yeah and but in India it can be it's always a very sweaty experience. It happens in the peak of the summer, and so by default by the end of it it rains, and there is a cooling and cleansing whatever way but again the sheer humanity that comes there. I mean, in my film I have shot people of all genders as well, including trans and many communities were normally otherwise not allowed and that kind of a thing, because once the gods come out, the streets belong to the people, and when the god comes out on the street, he is coming out of the control of the orthodoxy or religion or priesthood. He's there, and is for the people. So, and I met some very interesting people. Like in my documentary, I've interviewed this lady who's been coming from California for the last 25 years to attend the Rath Yatra at Puri. And then Ileana Sitarishti is a Padma Shri and a very eminent Odissi dancer who is also performs a lot of the songs from the Gita Govind and all that. And then met this guy in the ISKCON. They have this free food thing where they take food, and primarily it's always the students and the homeless who make up the queue, because they generally. I first met them setting up a counter outside the UCL London. So those kind of things. So yeah, I mean it's all about meeting this motley
You know,
set of you don't know who you will meet.
having met so many people in this in the second documentary, which sounds more like a solo trip, camera crew aside, you must have met people of low class, high class, this country, that country, X religion, Y religion. Not to define people by such conventional modes of identity, but uh, could you tell us? This is perhaps more of reflection, but could you tell us what new did you learn about India in this period?
That's a good question. I mean, yeah, Neil, what happens is when you meet a diversity of people, first thing you notice is the diversity of your own land, and the other thing that you notice is the such agency is there among people who may not be in the economic sense of things very rich. And see, I met so many villagers who just again they also start from their village. They walk barefoot. We can't do that. I mean, it becomes such a. I would normally wear shoe and walk, but like in even when they're doing the communion, it was that. But these people are walking barefoot from their home. Faith is what is moving them, and they're so happy. And some and like you can read 100 books on religion, and then you meet these people who are real practitioners of spiritualism in life, and that's a huge eye opener. They actually imbibe that, and they you see far more contentment with them. And you know that if you have seen Diwar, there is a scene in that when Amitabh Bachchan, when his mother is unwell, he goes to the temple of Lord Shiva and tells him that I, who was an atheist, was never entering your temple, whereas my mother was your huge devotee. आपने जितना उन पे जुल्म ढाया, she became more and more pious and religious. That's what he says. And today she is suffering, and that's why I've come here. And he's like, he's not praying to the God, he's conversing with them. That's something I noticed when you meet these people when they're standing in front of the chariot of the Lord. Because what happens is Lord Jagannath moved from his main Puri Shrine temple, couple of kilometers down the path, to his uh, aunt's place. It's a legend. So, which is the Gundicha temple, but he doesn't enter there the same day. He stays outside. and these people are going and shouting at him. Somebody is like just giving all sorts of, he says you're good for nothing person, and you're not solving my problems, and what kind of a god you are. Like people are doing catharsis. Sometimes what happens, and I believe that's where I experience the fact that why do we believe in the God so much? Because oftentimes we don't have anybody to talk to, or at least somebody who would patiently listen to us. And here is a God who's listening to you. In your mind, he's listening to you, and he's not talking back. He's not. So you just tell him, you just put all your problems before him and walk away with relief. I mean, that's like what catharsis is all about. You have a challenge, you need to just talk it out, and that's something very touching. I see. I mean, people just standing there and crying. And I remember I have this shot of my cameraman, like all 3 4 days we shot and all that. And the last day, when this moment was there, and he's a very conventional. I mean, that's not the right word. He's a very modern kid and who doesn't believe in going to the temples and all. But he's so moved by this thing, he just stands there and starts crying. And what happens? Why do the tears fall? You have no reason. Is it because of the cumulative genuineness of people around you? I mean, they are all thinking the same thing, and that's you really feel the power of faith. I don't often find it so much within the temple spaces where you are negotiating the price of a ticket, negotiating the best view for darshan and all those things. And here you can look at the Lord from any angle and just sit there, tell whatever you wanted to tell. And this is what I saw people doing there. And yeah, that's very
That
profound.
there was a very interesting phrase you used there, the cumulative genuineness. Uh, I sort of have another question, I think, that comes from here, which is, in your opinion, having seen so much, how do you see realistically different kinds of people living in harmony under one home, at home, being India?
Neil, if you stop reading the headlines and looking at the content that coming from the WhatsApp university, the nation is a far safer, happier, and a very welcoming space. And this is, I would go a little back around. Now we are in the 75th year of India's independence. Around the 70th year of Indian independence, I was doing a project of, it was a photo poetry project, eventually commissioned as a museum exhibit. So I went to about 25 locations across India, just going there, taking pictures, and it's like an extended travelogue, you can say. But my idea was not to come back and write travel pieces, but poetry pieces out of it. Like articulate my thoughts not through a caption, but through poems. And wherever I went, and this project took me from Badrinath up north to Shabrimala. I have walked that pilgrimage also to the Ayappa Mandir before all the controversy had begun and all. And
Hmm.
on the, been to Goa, to the northeast, Nagaland, and Rajasthan, all over. I mean, and just going in and see, when I travel, I don't normally prefer taking I just go and do what everybody does, like get into a public transport,
Hmm.
because that's where you get the pulse of the country. And I was in Calcutta at a time when the elections were happening and a lot of polarization was being reported. Of course, these incidents happen, but as they do in journalism, it's always like, bad news is always the good news for a journalist. And so that's a very different, I mean, the space I find. And I would encourage people to actually step out and beyond, and and whenever you read about all this strife and all that, yes, it happens, but it is not like it's a momentary thing. But people
Hmm.
generally are nice. People generally, I mean, that's why we are human beings. And if you step out and go out there, that's where you will find more human beings. Otherwise, it's mostly in the intellectual or other spaces, the discussion spaces and the media spaces, it's all about being human. But real human beings are all out there, and then the idea of home is a huge assurance. The nation as a home becomes a huge assurance. You walk into a tapri and people feed you. You walk into a place and they say see that you are drenched and all. Some random stranger will come with a towel, matlab gamcha hoga, he will come and say ये ले लीजिए, dry कर लीजिए अपना. This doesn't happen. There is no context to it. There is there is just you react to a fellow person in need, and that's how it is.
You know,
I tend to
well,
digress a lot, though, Neil, so you have to
I
keep me
don't
in
think
check.
any of these were digressions. It's all right, really. The page is called "Tell Me Your Story," so you can tell us your story. We have crossed the half an hour limit, but I don't want to let you go before I ask you at least one more question, because I know that you also have another movie in the works, which is about Upanishads. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so these other films that we discussed about, they're more like documentaries, like recording real people. But the Upanishad is something I've been reading it in bits and parts. But when the first major lockdown happened of 21 days, where you had nothing else to do, and so I picked up this is a principal Upanishad, one of the best translations by Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, our former president of India, and reading through it, and because Radhakrishnan was a comparative religion scholar, so along with the core text, what he does is he gives the subtext, but he also connects with these ideas to other faith traditions around that time. Like one, for example, the idea of Genesis. And what does the Old Testament say? What the Upanishads say? And that gives you a more holistic worldview because all these experiences are happening simultaneously. I mean, I always believe that we all had a shared story. The names change. I mean, you had the Noah's Ark. You have a similar Pralay story here, where Manu goes with a pair of each animal and bird when the earth is flooded for 7 days. So you find all the names keep changing. I mean, Zeus behaves always. Zeus, the king of the gods, is as insecure as Lord Indra. So these are all, and again, these names you will find in I know, the
Abraham,
Persian
Ibrahim,
traditions,
yeah.
yeah, all those places. So, when you look at all these narratives and the commonalities that are there, then you start asking questions about what where does a myth end and or a myth become a story becomes a truth becomes a legend, and it is like all cross pollinating here and there, and it makes you think a lot of things out there. Yeah, did I
I do
answer
think.
your question? I didn't, I guess.
Yeah, just so right now it's still in the research phase, is it?
Yeah, no. So the film, as it is already complete. It has already been submitted to film festivals. And but see, the big challenge with Upanishads is that unlike the Puranas or the epics, which is a story and you can film it,
Hmm.
Upanishads is a series of ideas. It is about basically young students or students for that matter asking a sage uh, questions, and the sages are giving answers, but they are saying that you find your own answer. Don't say take what we are saying as the truth. So the same questions keep repeating in various Upanishads, and different allegorical examples are given to answer them. So the big challenge was now how do we do it into a film. So what I
Oh.
did is I selected few of the important ones, and
Mhm.
I took certain ideas like the Genesis story in the not exactly the creation chapter. So that is one.
Mhm.
What does Upanishad talk about creation? What does it talk about the five elements that make a living being? What does it talk about inanimate, cosmos, universe, and all those things? And so I've constructed this as an experimental film opened through a collage of visuals, taking visual moments from the inanimate world, from the human world, the animal world, the plant world, and basically the five elements of the Panchabhuta, as you say, elements like fire, earth, water, ether. So all these elements represented through them, these shlokas are then converted into a script, which is like a dialogue, and it is a dialogue between a male voice and a female voice. The male voice represents the Purusha, and Purusha here is not the male, but the gender indeterminate self, and Prakriti, which is both nature as well as Mother Nature. So they have a conversation on things, and it just pans out on this series of visuals. And it is like I call it about 30 short films in one. The length is about 80, shot over 100 locations. So a lot of these footages that were previously collated, which where they lent meaning to a certain thing, they have been put there. So that's how it's an experimental film. So
It's a
either
sterling
it is
effort, really. It's a sterling
sorry.
effort to try to concretize something that is so abstract and certainly ambitious. Uh, there is
Thank
so
you, Neil.
much
But
more.
this is that kind of a film when in a festival, either people stay in the end or after 10 minutes they walk out. So,
Let's hope it's the former. Thank you, Dr. Pierce, for your time. We will wind up now. I would
thank you, Neil.
just like to end with a reminder that Tell Me Your Story is open for submissions. The story prompt is Homemakers. If your story is good enough, it may be published via Amazon. The deadline for that is 20th September. There are only 5 days to go. Registrations are also open for the writing program season 3 in association with Simon and Schuster. Find the details for both on tellmeyourstory.biz. That's tellmeyourstory.biz. Our next session is on the 17th of September. It is going to be the penultimate discussion of our homemaking talk series. It will be a panel discussion with the HR heads of NTPC, Ether Energy, and Infosys. The topic for that is team leaders as homemakers, the office as a second home. So we will view three of India's multinational conglomerates and see how they sort of cope during the COVID-19 period and how, etc., etc. We continue exploring India, then focus on corporate life and office space. Of course, that's day after tomorrow. For now, Dr. Piyush and I will take your leave. Thank you once again, Dr. Piyush, for your time here today.
Thank you.